Have you ever heard the parable of the poor fisherman and the rich businessman? Well, if so, I'm willing to bet that the person who told you this story or this parable was communicating a point that is entirely backwards and not what this story actually communicates. And so I'm going to cover the story for you and share with you what the true meaning of this parable really is. So first, here's the parable. Once there was a poor fisherman who was sitting on a beach on some island, and he was fishing for his daily food needs. He sat there for a couple of hours, cast his line into the water, and once he caught a few fish, he packed up his things and went into town. He sold a few fish for what he needed for his money that day, and he went about his business and relaxed with his family. Next day, he did the exact same thing. And there was also at that time a rich businessman who was on vacation on that island, and he observed this guy who was fishing every day for just a few hours. And after he was done fishing, he would go about his day doing whatever he wanted. So the businessman at the very end of his trip approached this poor fisherman and said, "Hey, I'm just curious. Why is it that you just fish for a few hours and then just to get exactly the bare minimum, what you need, and then you go on with your day doing other things? Why is it that you don't just fish longer?" And so the fisherman looks up at the businessman and says, "Well, what would I do? Why would I fish longer? What would I do with the extra fish?" And he's like, "Well, you could sell those fish and you could make some extra money." And the guy says, the poor man says, "Well, what would I do with that extra money? Because it's more than I need." And the businessman says, "Well, you would save it and eventually you would be able to have enough where you could buy a boat." And the guy says, "Okay, well, what would I do with a boat?" And the businessman says, "Well, if you build a boat, then you could go out and you could get into better waters and have more access to even more fish so that you can fish for those longer hours in better waters, and you could catch even more fish that you could sell." And the guy says, "Okay, well, what would I do with all of those extra fish that I don't need?" He says, "Well, you would sell those and now you'd have even more money." He says, "Okay, well, what would I do with all that extra money? Because, that's even more than what I need right now." And the businessman says, "Well, with all that extra money, you could probably buy another boat, buy some nets, and hire a few other people to fish for you. You could have your own little tiny fishing fleet every single day, catching tons of fish and raking in the profits from that." Hey, real quick, guys, I have a time-sensitive announcement for you. You don't need me to tell you that 2025 is so far shaping up to be an incredibly volatile and chaotic year. With the stock market already seeing a 10% correction in the NASDAQ, wild swings both up and down, geopolitical chaos abroad, and pretty much every day we are seeing news of things going one way or another. But the key is that all of this volatility and all of these surprises and changes represent opportunities. And so that's why on March 27th, write this date down, 7 p.m. Eastern time, I'm hosting a completely free asymmetric trading masterclass on Zoom. This is going to be a live call, and I'm going to show you how you can use asymmetric trades to profit from things like massive geopolitical events, the ongoing trade war, market crashes, currency crashes, extreme volatility, and more. All throughout modern history, asymmetric trades have handed out some of the biggest returns in the market to the people who knew how to use them, especially during market times like we have today. And I've personally been using this strategy to grow my portfolio over the last 2 years. If you're interested in learning exactly how it works and what asymmetric trades I'm looking at right now, click the link in the description below to sign up. Like I said, attendance is completely free, but the spots are limited. Last time I hosted one of these masterclasses, we had more people register for the event than could actually fit on the Zoom call. So if you're interested, make sure you sign up now to secure your spot, mark it on your calendar, and I'll see you there. The guy says, "Okay, well then what would I do with all of that extra money?" And the businessman says, "Well, eventually you'd save all of that extra money up that you're making at a much faster rate now, and maybe you could buy a much bigger boat and a better boat with a lot of really great equipment and do deep sea fishing and catch even better fish, more fish to make even more money." And the fisherman says, "Okay, well, what would I do with that money?" And the businessman says, "Well, if you really want to get crazy past that point, you could just keep on scaling this up and you save up the money, you invest that into more large boats, hire crews to run each boat, and eventually you could even package up that entire operation. You could go public with it, and you would have a big cash out, big payday, because you were able to sell a portion of this company to public investors, and you'd be rich. And the guy says, okay, well, what would I do once I was rich? And the businessman says, well, you could do whatever you want. You could relax on the beach and fish all day. And that's the end of the parable. And so the point that most people are trying to make when they talk about this is the difference between the American consumer, capital obsessed, capitalist idea of what life should look like, which is just work for more, work for more, work for more, regardless of the fact that you don't need it. And at the end of the day, you might be able to get something that you could get anyway. And so it's this idea that you shouldn't be sacrificing something that you can get right now so that someday later you can try and get it. It's like you don't sacrifice time with your kids today so that you have enough money to someday spend time with your kids. It's like just spend time with your kids today. And so that's the idea that most people are trying to convey here. But there are a couple of problems. There are a couple of problems with this. The first problem is the idea that profit is oxygen for business. And what I mean by that is if you don't run a profit, then you are not able to survive the times when you can't run a profit. In other words, what is the fisherman going to do if he continues to live the way he is living if something happens to the fish, if something happens to his fishing rod, if some building gets built up along that shore and he can't fish there anymore, if his leg gets broken in a freak accident and he can't walk to the beach anymore? What is going to happen if something comes in the way of him being able to just live a subsistence level lifestyle? In other words, if he's never building up a buffer, never advancing, never scaling, never saving, never investing, then he is always at risk for any minor interruption to completely take him out because he's never turning a profit. He is producing exactly the amount that he needs to consume. And so without producing a profit, you are vulnerable to any risk that could possibly happen. The reason that you produce a profit is to de-risk yourself. And the larger you scale up that profit, the more you de-risk yourself. In other words, if you take the businessman's approach and follow it all the way through, eventually you're living that exact same lifestyle with zero risk. Nothing, you don't even have to fish to catch fish all day once you've completed that cycle. You can just fish for fun. You don't even have to fish in that case. In other words, you are robust against any risk in that scenario. And so the point that most people completely miss about this is that profit is not just done for profit's sake and then it's ultimately meaningless at the end of the day. Profit is there to de-risk yourself. The second problem that most people don't see with this is the selfish lifestyle of the poor fisherman. The selfish lifestyle of the poor fisherman in his current lifestyle means he is producing the exact same amount that he consumes and he is never giving anything back to society. He lives, he dies, and society basically goes on as if he never existed. It is a selfish lifestyle that gives nothing back and leaves nothing for future generations. However, if you build something where you profit, in other words, you put aside some of the value of what you have produced, then what you are doing is giving real goods and services to society. And if you are able to take that and scale that up as the businessman explained in his example to the fisherman, what you are doing is even greater than that because you are providing jobs now for people, jobs that they wouldn't have had without you. The dignity of being able to provide for themselves in a very stable job because you have created this large fishing empire. You are also creating wealth for other people because if you follow the example and you bring investors on board and you sell part of your company, you now have an asset that produces cash flow, that produces profit. You're creating wealth that other people in the world have access to and can benefit from as well. And so the poor fisherman is living a very selfish lifestyle, even if he doesn't realize it. It might be unintentional, but that is the consequences of that line of action, is that you live a selfish lifestyle where you don't produce anything for society. You consume everything you produce and you never produce anything beyond that. Instead, building something where you are able to hire people and are able to produce more than you consume and do save up and do leave something of value, some wealth for future generations, that is a selfless lifestyle. And even if it lands you in the exact same position you were in before, where, hey, at the end of the day, you get to sit on a beach and fish, and you could have been doing that in the beginning. The difference is you have lived an unselfish lifestyle, produced a ton of jobs, a ton of dignity for people, a ton of livelihoods for people, a ton of wealth that will last for generations, and you've completely de-risked yourself because if anything ever happens to you, you have the ability to just fall back, relax, and not have to worry about it because you have produced so much more than you have consumed. And so I think those 2 points are completely missed by most people who look at the parable of the fisherman versus the businessman, and they think, hey, well, at the end of the day, if that pursuit of business is just for the sake of more, then I might as well just work part-time, give up my desire and my ambition to excel and build something for myself, and I'm just gonna go get an easy job where I don't really have to think about it. Somebody will give me a raise and I'm gonna just work part-time so I can, or maybe just don't even have to work overtime. It's still maybe a full-time job, but I don't have to do anything extra, just so I can lay back, enjoy my family and not worry about things. And yeah, I'm not making that much money, but it's just enough to survive on, and I don't have anything to save, but it's okay, somebody will take care of me. That's a selfish lifestyle. And I don't think the takeaway from this parable should be that that is an okay lifestyle to live. I think the takeaway should be, even if you're not thinking of scaling something up to the extent in this parable, I think the idea should always be we need to produce more than we consume because then we're actually benefiting society rather than living on the edge of risk and potentially risking society having to care for us because we weren't diligent enough to prepare for the risks that life usually brings our way. I know this was a little bit of a different video than normal, but I've seen people talk about this parable quite a bit recently, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. And if that's something that you enjoyed, there are other topics that I talk about, not on YouTube, but in my free newsletter. I call it Letters from a Heretic. You can sign up with that with the link in the description below. And if you use the link that says Get My Century Portfolio, that's a free course that I've designed to teach you how to pick stocks that will last for decades, if not a century. And I give you my 11 stock picks in that century portfolio. It's all completely free. That's my gift to you for signing up for my newsletter as well. Go ahead and find that with the link in the description below. As always, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.